Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. Today we are back in the book of Armenian folktales by A.G. Seklemian. Today we have a version of The Brave Little Tailor, but with an Armenian flavor. It is very similar to episode 78, Kara Mustafa, the hero from Turkey. I could not find a pronunciation guide for the main character's name, so I just did my best. Apologies. I also gave the wife an Armenian name because I was tired of women just being nameless 2D characters. Okay, let's begin. Dyjhicon, the Coward Hero. Dyjhicon was a poor, unfortunate fellow who only had 2 goats and a cow. His wife, Nazeli, was an ambitious woman who annoyed him by asking him to do basic chores around the house. "I want you to go out and do some work," she often said. "Our house is falling apart, my dress is torn and tattered, and we need oxen, sheep, a horse, and a wagon." Dyjhicon, tired of having to do chores, one day took his great stick and left their crumbling house with their cow, saying to himself, "Let me run from this wicked wife to the wilderness, and there I can die." This is what the woman wanted. If he was just going to sit at home all day and complain, the least he could do was to leave her alone. Thus he ran from her and wandered the wilderness. When he was hungry, he milked the cow and drank the milk, and when he was tired, he mounted the cow. He was very timid, a typical coward. The sight of a running rat was enough to make him tremble. He thought, nevertheless, it is better to be torn by wild beasts than to become the slave of that wicked woman. Nazeli was also relieved just to have some space for herself, without having to clean around that coward who asked her to shoo away the rats all day long. One day, as the cow was pasturing on a green meadow and Dyjhicon was laying down lazily, the flies stung him. He cursed Nazeli and clapped his hands to kill the flies. Then he counted to see how many flies he had killed in one stroke, and lo and behold, they were 7 in number. This encouraged him, and he took his knife and carved upon his stick these words: "I am Dyjhicon. I have killed 7 by one stroke of the hand." Then he got on the cow and rode away. After a long journey he came to a green meadow in the center of which there was a magnificent castle with an orchard around it. He let the cow graze in the meadow, and he lay down to sleep. 7 brothers lived in that castle. One of them, seeing Dyjhicon and his cow in the meadow, came to find out who it was that had ventured to enter their ground. Dyjhicon was sleeping with his stick standing near him. The man approached, and reading the inscription, was terrified. "What a hero!" he thought to himself. "He has killed 7 men by one stroke of the hand. He must be a brave man, else he would not dare to sleep here so carelessly. What courage! What boldness! He has come so far without arms, without a horse, without a companion. This man is surely a great hero." He went and informed his brothers as to what he had seen, and all the 7 brothers came to pay their respects to the unknown hero and to invite them into their humble home. The cow, being frightened by their approach, began to leap and bellow. Her voice awakened Dyjhicon, who, seeing 7 men standing before him, was terrified, and snatching his club, stood aside trembling. The 7 brothers thought that he was angry with them, and was trembling on account of his wrath, and that he would kill all of them by one stroke of his stick. Thereupon they began to supplicate him to pardon their rudeness in disturbing his repose. Then they invited him to go with them, saying, "We are 7 brothers, and have a great reputation for good fighters in this district. But we shall be entirely invincible if you will join us and become our elder brother. We will take great pleasure in placing our house and all that belongs to us at the service of such a hero as yourself." Hearing this, Dyjhicon ceased trembling and said, "Very well, let it be as you say." They took him to the castle with great pomp, and served to him a grand banquet, at which all the 7 brothers stood before him, folding their arms upon their breasts, and awaiting his permission to sit. Dyjhicon was in a great alarm. His heart was faint, and he had fallen into meditation as to the manner in which he might free himself from this perplexing situation. The 7 brothers thought that he was not only a very brave hero, but was also such a great sage that he did not even care to look at their faces. They began to cough in a low voice to draw his attention. On account of his internal fear, Dyjhicon suddenly shook his head. The 7 brothers took this as permission to sit. After the banquet, they said to him, "My lord, where have you left your horse, arms, and servants? Will you command us to go and bring them?" "Horse and arms are necessary for timid men," said Dyjhicon. "I have never had need of them. I use a horse and arms only when I fight a great battle. As to servants, I never need them. All men are my servants. You see, I have come so far having only a cow and my stick. Dyjhicon is my name. I have killed 7 by one stroke of the hand." Their esteem and admiration for Dyjhicon increased every day, and at last they were so much fascinated by his alleged bravery that they gave him in marriage to their only sister, who was a very beautiful maiden. Dyjhicon knew that he was unworthy, but he could not refuse this gift. Also, he was still married to Nzeli, but what could he do? He was such a coward. He said, "I will do you the favor of marrying her, since you entreat me so earnestly." They brought costly garments, and putting them on Dyjhicon, made him a handsome bridegroom. They had a splendid wedding festival, which was reported in all the neighboring countries. The 4 princes of the neighboring countries had asked for the hand of the maiden in marriage, and all of them had been refused. Now, hearing that the maiden was given in marriage to a stranger, the 4 princes waged war against the 7 brothers. Dyjhicon, hearing this, was stricken with fear, and longed that the earth might open its mouth and swallow him. He thought to run away, but there were no means of escaping. When he indulged in these sad meditations, the 7 brothers came and bowed down before him and said, "What is your order, my lord? Will you go fight yourself, or will you have us go first?" This caused Dyjhicon's heart to melt. He began to tremble in his whole body and strike his teeth against one another. The 7 brothers thought that it was because of his violent rage, and that in his fury he would destroy whole armies. "My lord," they said finally, "let us 7 brothers go fight them at first, and if we find them hard to conquer, we will send you word, that you may come to our assistance." Well, do so," answered Dyjhicon, somewhat relieved. They went and began the battle. Their neighboring peoples were in constant terror of the 7 brothers, who were famous as brave fighters. Now that they also had a brother-in-law who could kill 7 men by one stroke of the hand, their foes were more than afraid of them. But this time the men of the 4 princes were united, and they fought with unusual zeal and determination. This caused the 7 brothers to retreat a little, and they sent to their brother Dyjhicon, saying, "We are in trouble. Come to our assistance." A fast horse and magnificent arms awaited him. He began to curse the day when he had come to that house. But what could he do now? At last he decided to go to the battlefield, cast himself against the swords of the enemy, and die. Death was preferable to such a disgraceful life. As soon as he mounted the horse, the beast, who knew that the rider was inexperienced, ran away like a winged eagle. Dyjhicon could not stop it or manage it. The 7 brothers thought he was so brave that he left the horse free in order to reach and slaughter the enemy. The horse broke into the line of the enemy, who began to fly, saying, "Who can stand before this great hero?" In their hurry to retreat, they began to slaughter one another. Dyjhicon, who had never been on horseback before, was so afraid that he thought he was already lost. As the horse was running through the forest, he threw his arms around an old oak tree and embraced it, letting the horse go from underneath him. The tree happened to be rotten, and so was rooted out when he took hold of it. This caused a great panic among the enemy, who ran away exclaiming, "Aha! He has pulled up an enormous oak by the roots, and now means to batter us to pieces with it. Who can stand before this strong warrior?" So crying as they ran away, they slaughtered one another. Thereupon the 7 brothers came and embraced the feet of their heroic brother-in-law, and exclaimed, "What magnificent courage! What great victory!" With these words they brought Dyjhicon home with a great pomp and glory. The 4 princes who waged the war being greatly humiliated, sued for reconciliation. And in order to gain Dyjhicon's favor, each of them sent him as a present 1,000 ewes with their lambs, 10 mares with their colts, and other costly offerings. Thus the greatest coward became the greatest hero. The end. Well, that was an interesting ride. The people mistaking his cowering and shaking for rage and power caught my attention. And I always do wish for these tales to have more for the women in the stories, but alas. In the original, her name was just his wife, so I picked an Armenian name and gave it to her. Still, really cool story, and I like how he uprooted the tree and all that. And the podcast Shoutout is to Uncited. It's the internet's least reliable English literature podcast. Join former English majors Amy and Chantelle as they revisit the good, the bad, and the spectacularly ridiculous literary works from their undergrad. It is a really well done podcast, and I'm sure one of the hosts could totally take Glenn from Nuzzle House in an arm wrestling competition. And if you like their podcast as much as I do, go give them a listen and a rating and a review. And the listener shout-out is to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The city goes back to before the written record. In fact, a survey of worldwide human DNA pointed back to Addis Ababa area for the spread of humans around 100,000 years ago. Despite being in the middle of the Oromia state, Addis Ababa is mostly populated by the Amharic ethnic group. It was once called Finfine in the Oromian language, referring to the hot springs located in the city. When Menelik came through and expanded his empire, he renamed it Addis Ababa, meaning new flower, and made it into the capital of the new empire of Ethiopia. So, to my listener in Addis Ababa, I say, Emize gine lehu, ina dehina deri. Thank you, and good night.